Welcome back to the post-lunch session of Odisha Art and Literature Festival, 9th edition and second day. We'll have a felicitation of Sri Damodar Mauzo, and Damodar Mauzo will be in conversation with Mili Aishwarya. I request Sri Damodar Mauzo to please grace the stage, and I also request Madam Mili Aishwarya to please come. And for the felicitation, I request Manu Das, Director of the festival, and Dr. Satya Mahanti, Advisor, Odisha Art and Literature Festival, to please grace the stage. Please come. I also request Samanjasa Das to please come. Sri Damodar Mauzo is the recipient of Jnanapith Award for 2022 and among many other awards, Sahitya Academy Awards for 1983. Mauzo, who lives in Goa, is a short story writer and novelist, writing in Konkani. He is also a columnist, critic and script writer. He has so far over 30 books of fiction to his credit, besides his edited and translated works. He is a widely translated author. And now, thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Mahanti, Sri Samanjasa Das, and Sri Manu Das. And now, I request Madam Mili Aishwarya to continue the program, conversation.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful being back here for the second time. So, hello Bhubaneswar. I hope we are able to wake all of you up after a lovely lunch, and we'll try and keep the conversation lively as much as possible. I'll also open it for questions after half an hour or so you can hold your thought and I'll open the floor for questions later. This session and this conversation is about writing, is about Mr. Mauzo's life. And what we thought and we agreed to do was that we'll keep it as a freewheeling conversation. We'll talk about his life as a writer, his influences, and of course, the books that he's written. So to begin with, Mr. Mauzo, tell me about your childhood in Goa. And we were talking earlier about your early days, influences, because the kind of Goa that you've seen, the parts that you lived in, is very different than sometimes what we get to see as tourists. So what were these early impressions of Goa, and how did it become a part of your writing?
Yes, I was born in Goa some 80 years back. So I was lucky that I was witness to the Portuguese colonial rule until I was 17 or so. Then I was privy to the Indian Army marching in the states of Goa to liberate Goa. Then I was also witness to the threats to our Goa as an entity, because the neighboring state Maharashtra had an eye on getting Goa merged with Maharashtra state, which we opposed tooth and nail. Then we had to fight, rather we had to take to streets where we led an agitation for recognition to our language, which unfortunately had suffered at the hands of history and also at the hands of geography, because people had to run away from Goa, the mainland of Konkani, in exodus to the neighboring states. So we have suffered a lot at the hands of history and also at the hands of geography. But then we succeeded in retaining the independent identity, independent entity, Goa as independent state. And then we also succeeded in getting the due recognition as the official language of Goa, our language, and also get Konkani included in the 8th schedule of the Constitution, which was a national recognition. So we had to struggle all the time. I think until I was in my 40s, I continued to struggle. And even today, I think the days are not over. We have to remain vigilant to see that our the social texture of Goa. Goa probably, I don't know how many people know. Most people know Goa is a touristic place. But Goa is as good and as bad as any other part of this world. But we have to struggle to retain our identity. That is the cause that I have been championing all my life. And of course, I have been championing also as a writer, the right to liberty, I would say. So that way I feel that freedom of speech is very, very important as a writer, as a reader, and as a member of the society. And that is what I continue to do. Well, Goa is known to you. If you want to know the real Goa, then you have to read the literature of Goa. That's what I believe.
Absolutely. I think in a country like ours, a large and diverse country with so many different states and cultures that we have in different states, it's important to maintain our traditions and keep to our roots. And that is, I think, what you're doing through your writing. And you've chosen always to write in Konkani, which is also special. So tell us a little bit about the history of or tradition of Konkani language and some unique features, and why do you love it so much?
Well, Konkani language belongs to the Indo-Aryan group of languages, part of Maharashtri Prakrit, which branched off from Maharashtri Prakrit as an independent language, along with Marathi, rather as our George Abraham Grierson puts it. He says, one who conducted the first ever linguistic survey of India, as he puts it, the Konkani was first born. Konkani was the first to branch off from Maharashtra Prakrit before Marathi. But unfortunately, because of historic reasons, it lagged behind. You won't believe, during the British rules, no regional language suffered at the hands of the colonial rule. But in Goa, yes, the Portuguese were very harsh to our language because they were keen on killing our culture, and language is culture. That is what they believed. It is true. But then in 1684, there was a total ban on my language. People could not speak it. I mean, they were banned from speaking, from using it for letters, or even the folklore was not allowed to be performed in public. So that was the fate. Unfortunately, it continued for 200 years. And later on, though they relaxed their laws, it was a terrible loss for the language because we had already drifted away from the mainstream languages of India, the Konkani language. And finally, we remained aloof until Goa was liberated in 1961. But I am happy that after 1961, it took another few years, many years, rather 2 decades or 3 decades, to get the recognition as a state, as an independent language, as a literary language recognized by Sahitya Academy, then inclusion of Konkani in the 8th schedule of our constitution, and we had to struggle for it. But then we attained what we wanted, and I think we are already, we have been successful in attaining a place in the mainstream of Indian languages and cultures.
No, absolutely. I think it's not easy to sort of like continue, and there are writers, other writers also. I know that you mentor personally, and there's a whole community now, thriving community of Konkani writers. But language is culture, and definitely believe that. I remember Gulzar once said that you're a crusader of Konkani, of the language, and rightly so. But you yourself call yourself a shopkeeper as well, because that is what you did for several years, and where you met, several characters.
Yeah.
Also, some real life stories that you used in your novels and your short story collections. And we were just talking about the novel that you wrote that everyone loves. So I'm not going to say more. I want you to tell our audience today about this very special book that everyone seems to fall in love with, about a maid from Goa.
Yeah, well, I graduated in 1968. I went for my college education to Mumbai. Everywhere I went, I brought some, I gained something. I went to Mumbai, spent 4 years in Mumbai. I won my better half, she is here, in my college. And then I returned from Mumbai in 1968. There were plenty of opportunities open for me. In fact, Goa was just liberated hardly a few years back, and then there were very many job opportunities available. Most of my colleagues, my friends, my contemporaries, they retired as either directors or managing directors of, but then I preferred to go become a shopkeeper. My father ran the business, and I preferred to remain in the village where I worked on my shop. My wife also supported me, and probably because I always felt that I should remain in touch with my village and my people in my village. And that is why I think I am a writer today. Many people think that how could you become a writer when you are running a shop or when you were a shopkeeper? But I believe that I am, because I was a shopkeeper, I remained in touch with my people. I remained in touch with the social issues, and as a result, that has reflected or helped me to become a writer, because I had a lot of things to reflect upon and to write upon. So that is the way it has been. Well, I think I never regretted becoming a shopkeeper.
And the character that you said, you may encounter.
Yeah, most of the characters I met across the counter of my shop. If you have read some story, like story that has become very viral, Teresa's Man.
Yes.
The Teresa's Man I met at the shop. I met Teresa, I met her husband. Teresa was a working woman. The husband was just spending his days idly, a drunkard. He used to come to the shop, wait for the train to arrive. My shop was just across the railway station. So he would spend some time at my shop, where I came to know that he comes here, stands there, and buys one fag, smokes, and waits for a wife to join, and then take her on his bicycle. And then on every Sunday, he would bring her to the shop. They would purchase the provisions for them, and then he would scratch his head asking for one pack of cigarettes, which she would oblige him with. So that is how I saw this character, and I wrote this story on, which has become very popular. And even the title of one of the collections is Teresa's Man. So most of the characters, I'll give an example.
Sure.
I have another story called Coin's House Cattle. The story, probably you have to read it, but I'll tell you how I get the seeds or genesis for a story. One day on a Sunday, I opened the shop at around 8:30. Sunday, people come early to the shop, and otherwise I open at 9. But that day I opened at 8:30, and then suddenly I heard the tinkling of the bells in the necks of the cattle. So I looked across, and I found there's a road in front of my shop. So I found a person, a villager, a farmer. He was pulling the cattle, two of them, one cow and one bull. That is what I have written about in story. So he was pulling them towards the city, because that day on Sunday in the month of May there is a fair where the cattle are exchanged. They sell, buy and sell. So probably he was taking there, I thought, and I forgot about that. Later in the evening, say around 6:30 or so, during the dusk, I found them. Again, I heard the tinkling of the bells. Then I looked across the street and I found this time the scenario had changed. Earlier it was this farmer who was pulling the cattle, whereas now the cattle was running and the farmer was being pulled. So I was wondering why it should happen. Then I realized, of course it was my imagination, then I thought that he was taking the cattle for selling, which he could not sell them, and he is coming back. And he is sad because probably he had some other things to do after selling them. So that is how that gave birth to this story. And this became another very good story, which gave me a lot of fame. But this is how this shop has helped me imagine and actually look at and look into the people and their affairs. Yeah.
Oh, really interesting, because you're in the middle of the social milieu.
Yeah.
You must have also seen Goa change over the decades. So in your mind, through the past 30, 40 years, and you've been at the center of the society and meeting various kinds of people, how do you think Goa has changed and what it has become now?
It's a sad story that Goa that I see today is totally different from what I have in my mind 60 years back. Yes, Goa has changed. It has become a touristic center, which is not contributing to the well-being of Goan society, I feel. We are sad about it. Though people who come as tourists, they enjoy Goa, they speak very highly of Goa, but I know what we have lost in the process. So I am privy to the earlier days and I am privy to what is happening today. I can see the difference, but if you want to see exactly what has changed, you have to read our literature. I've been writing for last 60 years, and just in the morning as people were talking about translation, they said the language also has changed over the year. It has so happened to my language, it has so happened to my society, it has so happened to Goa. It is no more the Goa of 1960s. But then there is no regret. The change is always a constant. So no regrets about it. But yes, I have seen Goa changing for better or worse. But it has changed. Yes, in 1960, there were hardly any schools. There were no colleges. I had to go, for my college, I had to go to Mumbai. But then now the things have changed. We have our own engineering colleges, we have our own IIT, we have our own many colleges, hundreds of colleges have sprung up and so on. So in a way we have benefited by liberation, we have been benefited by freedom that we are enjoying today. But at the same time, yes, there are many good things we have lost.
I remember you telling me that in yesteryears you never used to lock your doors, yes. And you guys would sleep with open doors out in the veranda, and
yes,
that was a different life, right?
Yes, Millie, that was the golden period. In fact, in Goa, we never felt scared of any robbers or thieves or any murders. Nothing was happening. Once in a year, one person was dead somewhere, and then there was people were gossiping about the murder that happened some distant place. And if one cop, one policeman crosses this, walks along the street with a lathi, not even just a short cane, then people were wondering why he's come to our village. But now every village has a police station. Every village has a patrolling being done. So it was not so. In my house, I'll tell you, in the month of May, when the humidity went up and when the weather was very hot, my hall had 5 doors. Doors, no windows. We never had windows. We had 5 doors on this side and 3 on the front side. And we used to leave all the doors open for the ventilation. And also, we were sleeping, even sometimes out of the hall, in the veranda, we were sleeping in the open. And nobody felt it was something odd. But today, we can't. All the 5 doors now we have been changed into 4 windows and 1 door. And we never had in Goa, you never saw any doors or any windows with grills. But now every window has a grill. This is the change that has happened.
No, definitely. I think life has come a long way. I also wanted to talk about our book, The Weight and Other Stories that we published at Penguin, which is a collection of short stories. And I'm particularly reminded about the story about the writer and the thief. And you've given a very interesting title to it. It's called The Gentleman Thief. So why don't you tell all of us a little bit about the story?
See, over the years I've been writing, as I said. I'll just go back.
Sure.
I wrote my first short story in 1963.
Yeah.
It was a story, I'll not delve into it, but then during last, say, 60 years, I've written only about 100 plus stories. I write only when I have to. If you ask me, Millie, we want a collection of short stories, will you give me some 10 stories or 15 stories for a collection? I would not be able to do it. Even if any editor asks me one story for the Diwali issue, most of the times I have failed because I cannot write for the magazine on demand. But whenever I am inspired, I have to write, then I immediately. Generally, most of my stories, I'm not boasting about it, please don't misunderstand. But my way of writing is different. I write one story at one sitting. If I write half a story today and leave half tomorrow, it is never completed. Never.
Finish it in one sitting.
I have to.
Interesting for all the writers here.
No, everyone has his own process. My process is maybe different from others. I mean, there is nothing.
You have to finish it, like you have to
I have
take
to
the
finish
story
it.
out.
And sometimes, most of the times, because I ran the shop earlier, later on my wife gave me time to write. But then most of the times I sat late in the night, say started at 10:30 in the night, finished by 1:30, 2:30 in the night, and then leave the pages on my table, and I went to sleep. Next day morning, before I woke up, my wife would go through the story and give her comments. But I don't like to make any changes, not even a word. I feel one word, if you take out of the story, it will be incomplete, and if I add another story, it will be unnecessary there. Because when I write the story, it's like an artist doing the painting. He cannot add a stroke.
Work in a flow.
Yeah, and he cannot add a stroke next day. Or he cannot remove anything from that. So the same way, I think, as a writer, I have to, when I write a story, I never make any changes. Except once, I'll tell you, after writing the story, my wife said, this middle sentence that you have used, that should have come in the end. And I really realized what a difference it will make to the story. That was one of the rare occasions where I listened to her and made the necessary
and
change.
you edited.
Yeah, it is the same story. No, it was another story. But then, yes, I write at one go, and probably that is my way of writing. Even today, if Carmelin was written in 20 days, Tsunami Simon, another novella, which ran into about 150 plus pages, less than 200 pages, I finished in 5 days. Because everything is ready in my mind. Not that I don't know what is going to happen next, but the genesis are there, and I know what I am going to end up as. So it starts, when I start, I know where I'm going to.
You know the end
I know
when you
the
start
end.
writing.
Most of the times, 99% of the times, I know where I'm going to. So it is like entering a train with the destination in mind. So I can't just stray from anywhere in the middle. So I have to go to the destination. I'll find the shortest way. That is why probably I am a short fiction writer, short story writer, because I always find shortcuts. I don't take long cuts. If I have to go from Bhubaneswar to Goa, I'll find the shortest route to Goa. Not like the flights that take me to Hyderabad and then to Goa, or Raipur and then to Goa.
You want a direct flight.
I take the shortest route. Yes. And that is probably why I don't like to add anything in the story or remove anything from the story. It comes naturally.
Naturally. It's really interesting.
By the way,
process,
please don't misunderstand me. I'm not sending a message across to the young writers to tell them that they should do this writing like this. No. In fact, I advise my juniors, my students who come to me, or young writers who come to me, I tell them, please read again. Please read again. Even if you have to make 3 drafts, 5 drafts, please go ahead. But if there is an urge to change, then you change it. That is the reason.
Everyone cannot be Damodar Mauzo, so I think that's the lesson here. But like you said earlier, everyone has their own method and style of writing. Yeah. I think because you have the story so clearly in your head, especially the ending.
You were asking me about...
Yes, we will come to Gentleman Thief too, but I really found this bit very interesting, and thank you for sharing all the internal processes. It was fascinating. And now when I reread some of the stories or your novel, then I will look at it like that, right? Because usually what writers do is that they do several drafts and they do revisions and they make changes along the way. I think that is how some of them work. But coming back to Gentleman Thief, which I found very interesting, why don't you tell all of us a little bit about this encounter between a writer and a thief?
Gentleman Thief. The protagonist is a reclusive writer who doesn't like to go in the public, address the people, go to the literary events. No, he prefers to stay at home and keep writing. But his writing is different. It ends with the word Kafka, which is, I don't say it is a Kafkaesque story, but you can call it, because my critics have called it as a Kafkaesque story. So here there is a writer and a professor involved. A professor who forces his entry in the writer's house in the middle of the night, 1:30 in the night, and then the writer gets up and to find an intruder in the house. So he was surprised. He doesn't act against him, but he is asking, what do you want? He said, I want something to rob. Then he says, but I am a writer, you won't find anything. If you are hungry, I'll give you something. He said, please give. And then there is an interaction going on between the writer and the thief. And he finds the thief is a gentleman thief. He doesn't want to commit any harm. He is not carrying any knife or any gun or anything. And he is calm and cool. And later on, it is revealed later, towards the end, that he takes away one night he comes and he steals his manuscript. Then he gets upset. The protagonist, the reclusive writer, gets upset. He said, he realizes that this man has taken it away. But the next day when he gets a phone call, and he says, did you take my script? Yes. If you want, you take it. I have it. Then please give it back. He says, no, you have to come and collect it. And he is ready to go because he has, it is the precious thing for him. So next day he goes to him. He takes him to a college. There is what are you doing here? He said, I teach here. You teach? You are a thief. So you tell them how to rob the people? He said, no, come inside. And he says, I teach literature here. And then he takes the man, the writer, to his class. Because the writer is very angry, but then he has no way. He wants his script back. So he takes him to the class. It's a class of graduates, what do you call it? The graduation class and students of literature. So they say, why you have brought me here? Nobody knows me here. He said, why? They know you. He says, will you, the professor asks the students, you know him? What is his name? They say, Franz. That's not my name. Then they say, it's Franz Kafka. And then he realized there is some similarity between his writings and Kafka's writings. So that is how it ends. It gets back. But then somehow the story is a very short story, maybe running into less than 2,000 words. Generally, my stories run into 3,000 plus. Yeah. But then that is a short story. And that is how I got it. By the way, the genesis, I'll tell you. A young friend of mine suddenly died one day. So I went to his house to pay a condolence visit to his wife and children. And I was told, and he was a very progressive-minded and rational-minded person, who was my friend. And they said one day, there was a thief here. And the man, my friend, invited him inside instead of driving out and served him tea and asked him for food. And he said, come again someday. So that was the, genesis where I got,
where you got the idea for
the seeds I got there, and that is how I wrote. So every story, there is a story behind every story. This is not true of me only. This is true of every story writer will also agree.
Absolutely. There's a story behind every story. And I have one last question before I'll open the floor for questions. You've always stood for, freedom of speech and, for writers to speak their mind and write their stories in a way that they want to and talk about social issues. What is one advice that you'd like to give to writers today?
Well, the only advice, I don't like to give advice because they have their own independent minds. They are the best people to decide for themselves. But then of late, what pains me is to see the writers, keeping away from telling the truth. Or rather, when time comes to talk about, they keep mum. Yeah. This is what pains me. I think every writer has his duty towards his society, towards his people. And I think he should open up whenever time demands. Need not, we have our weapon, we have our pen, a very powerful pen. Then you write about it. And I'll tell you, as yesterday somebody had mentioned here, I think it was Satyam Mohanty who said, actually the people in the dispensation, whether in the opposition or in the dispensation, they are always scared of writers. They are scared that whatever they do wrong will be exposed. So it is the duty of our writers to expose what is wrong in the society, what is wrong. People think why writers should be bothered about politics. No, politics is the way of our life. Politics is part of our life.
Yeah, we vote. We live in a democracy, so we are part of it.
It is part of our life. And we cannot shy away from telling the truth. That is the only concern that I have for our writers. I don't want to give any advice as such, but be true to yourself and speak the truth. That's all.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I have now the floor open for questions. So if you have any question, please raise your hand and we'll pass the mic around.
Please, any question?
Okay, I think, okay, one at the back, yes. Can we get you a mic? Can
Yes.
we pass mic?
Sir, namaste. Great listening to you, sir.
Thank you.
I have a question. I have asked this question and have been asked this question too by my students, and we talk about truth, but we see two categories of writers in India. So one category is very selective when they say truth. Whose truth, by the way? And sometimes I have seen writers hold on to a particular ideology, and they think the truth of that ideology is the truth. Should a writer have an ideology? Or should a writer proudly stand outside the cottage industry of all ideology and, whenever possible, be a critical insider and critique? Because we see, and also, is it not possible to clinically separate the writer from the ideology? Because when we read an Argentine writer called Jorge Luis Borges, Borges believed that, yes, he was highly critical of communism, but he said that, don't read me for my ideology because I'm not writing fables, I'm writing fiction. So would you like to say something on this, whether a writer should have an ideology or a writer should proudly stand outside the cottage industry of every single ideology for that matter? Thank you very much, sir.
No, my take on this is one has to be true to oneself. What is important is the ideology can differ. I don't mind you holding one ideology and oppose the other. But if one has to be convinced himself, without conviction he should not speak or he should not act. But I think one should have his own ideology, but it should not be, you should not feel ashamed of his ideology or somebody else. You should not criticize without truth in it. But one thing important, more important is one has to be true to yourself. If one has to believe in what you are writing or what you tell. Now for example, Ayn Rand is a rather a rightist writer. I like her novels. I like her Fountainhead or Exodus, whichever it is. But I am not getting carried away by that. So she has the right to speak the truth, her truth, and I have right to believe in my truth. So, but it doesn't come in the way of our writings or reading. So that is the way I think. I'm not sure whether I have given you right answer. I'm not an academic, but then, yes, I believe that one has to stick to his own ideology and also his own truth. If something is wrong with my ideology, I should be open enough to accept it and react on that. That is the only thing I feel. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions before we wrap up today? Okay, with that, I think we come to the end of our session. It has been wonderful talking to you. It's been an honor and a pleasure. So thank you so much, Mr. Mauzo.
Thank you.
Thank you so everybody, much. And thank you, Millie, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Sri Damodar Mauzo. We are actually honored to have you here, a great writer like you. We are also very much thankful to Madam Millie Aishwarya for this wonderful session.